Let's start with our fourth panel discussion of the day, and this is the big challenging time immediately after lunch starting. So I hope we have a very interesting topic which will keep people interested and prevent them from getting into the post-lunch lull. So this panel is on basically OT security and how much are organizations prepared for the OT security. And I would like to call on stage for this panel Sai Prasad, CTO of IoT and Digital Engineering from TCS. I'd like to call on stage Bhaskaran K, Senior Manager Transformation and Projects, IT from Airworks. I'd like to call on stage Krishnamurthy Rajesh, Director IT Global from GreyOrange. And I'd like to call on stage Priya Kanduri, CTO and Senior Vice President from Happiest Minds. So again, like the previous panels, we would like to start with a common question to each panelist. We know a lot of organizations, however much technology obsolescence and tech replacements we talk about, many Indian organizations, if not all, do still have a lot of legacy systems which are there. And typically, these are the operational technology systems. And these are often have very outdated version of software, which probably those software solution providers are not supporting anymore. And same with hardware, ditto with hardware. So now, when there are so much within this industrial environment, so much of these legacy systems, how critical is the challenge of OT security, and especially for enterprise? How do you create a sort of inventory and a sort of an asset discovery roadmap of all the OT devices with whatever configurations and vulnerabilities they pose, and how critical it's for enterprises to do so? I'll start with you, Mr. Sai Prasad.
Yeah, good afternoon, all. Thank you very much for having me here. In fact, I would like to define legacy. I mean, it's like I'm actually legacy in the sense that technology is moving so fast. And if I'm not sitting and understanding what is happening, I'm legacy. I hope that woke you up. So let's talk about legacy from the OT perspective. Essentially, what we see, and that's the paradox and that's the challenge that we face, is if I take any of these devices that are old, and basically what happens is, especially when you come to IoT or manufacturing or any of these utilities, people say whatever is working, let it continue to work. So they don't update anything on the hardware, neither do they update software. And both of these are extremely important. I mean, it's like how you have your phone, right? You don't update your OS for a long time, you're actually exposing certain things to a vulnerable situation. That is fine to a level. It's fine to, like, for example, let me talk about one example that happened in the US. This is actually, if you have read about Cyber Avengers, this was actually a Unitronics PLC, which was attacked by Cyber Avengers, which is actually an Iranian-based terrorist firm, which attacked the US on this particular PLC, and that happened on a very simple thing, that they used a default password. Okay, and they also connected on a default port. Both, and then the third one, which is more important, was these PLCs were exposed to the internet. Now, if I take the first two, it's still okay. It's still okay because you're not exposed anything. But when you talk about digital transformation and you want to actually leverage digital, you want to get real-time visibility, you want to get data, you actually start exposing these on the internet, and that's when things open up, and people don't understand what is the basic need for actually updating your operating system, keeping your hardware in sync, and that of course costs money. Of course, that's one of the things I understand from both sides. I mean, if you look at it from a person who has been there in the shop for a long time, he doesn't want to change things. But at the same time, if you get the new age technology, you really want to leverage that, and both. So that paradox is always there. So that's where I would stop here, Rajneesh.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks. So basically, the defining the legacy itself, that's one critical aspect of it. Bhaskaran, I'll ask you the same question. Basically, how do you define the legacy, and what are technology decision makers in the organizations doing to sort of map what are those legacy OT systems?
Thank you. To continue on, Sai sir mentioned, I'm basically I'm not from sea level, so my inputs will be at the more at the operational level. So to define legacy system, what we understood is where we have lack of software support from vendors, and as well as we operated without patches for a very long time, and now the latest version is not compatible, or our vendors are not able to support, and there are technology gaps as well. So one practical solution worked for us is we we scheduled the updates. We went back in time. I mean, not literally, but we came up with a roadmap where we have to keep up with the compliance and security requirements. So we planned a roadmap, and we came up with a plan. We came up with a checklist. We came up with the cross-functional team where operations team as well as IT team, where our security personals from both sides were involved, and we clearly plotted down a roadmap and we implemented. We came across a lot of friction, because obviously your operations team is not going to support you, because they obviously run at 200%, 300% capacity at any given time because of the production requirements. But to manage that, we have to have a clear roadmap, and that is from people and process perspective, and from technology perspective. Thanks to technology, it has grown to a level where we have specialized solutions, tailored solutions for OT environments, where if you have the set problems, like you have not updated for a very long time, or your vendor is obsolete and he is not able to provide, our some of the vendors are able to tailor some solution for you and give you the patch. So that worked for us. That is one option you can consider.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for giving us an operational perspective of how organizations are looking at the legacy systems. Krishnamurthy, Rajesh, I'll come to you next with the same question in terms of the identifying the legacy systems, and how do you create a sort of a inventory of those devices.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and good afternoon, Bangalore. I hope that after lunch session, this particular session would have some insights for you guys to take back when the session ends. By asking these questions, I think you have touched upon one very interesting fact, which is a legacy system. What is the definition of legacy system? Legacy system is not those systems which is outdated, which is old. Legacy systems are those systems which is not been identified, which is not been discovered. In today's world, there could be a lot of systems which we are using, but if you go and ask them about in terms of management or maintenance, the answer would be someone has come here, someone has installed it, someone had implemented it, and they have went back, right? And one of the best part which Mr. Sai just touched upon is the compromise on the credentials. Most of the time, what happens is when you do a setup, you do it in a default setup, right? Either it can be username or a password, because once it's been set up, it's been set up. And as a tendency, as a human being, we do not act unless and until something is compromised, something is breached, because otherwise we feel, why should we touch some system which is already running, right? And unless and until you discover those threats in real life scenario or real time scenario, you will not be able to find a mitigations. Because in today's world, I'm sure that most of you guys are aware of the botnet, right? Botnet attack. So botnet is nothing but it's a sequence of the machines which can interact internally to create a completely rogue environment. Probably you might not even know. In certain scenarios, there can be a what do you call connectivity which is getting established from the external world, which probably you might not know unless until something happens. Like the example what gentleman just said about state sponsored. I will not call it as state sponsored because I am not aware of that. So, but still, so those things are absolutely, unless and until you are aware, it is a legacy. And the moment you are aware, then are we ready to take a call on that to mitigate? That's another question. In today's world, when we are talking about IT OT, so people are talked about PLC system, people talked about SCADA system, PLC talked about a lot of shop floor systems which was isolated in today's world, as well as Earl. But now what happened is, because of digital transformation, people have started talking about interconnectivity between IT and OT, convergence between IT and OT. Wherein in the IT system, they have built a lot of firewall, guardrail to protect, but the OT is still obsolete, not only from an angle of when it has been implemented, but how it's been managed. Because for a shop floor person, if you go and say that, I want to change the PLC, the person will say that my aim is to run the line. My aim is not how to run the line. So those are some challenges which is actually prevailing in today's world. That's what my answer would be in terms of legacy system.
Okay, thanks for first giving the definition of what exactly constitutes legacy. The one example I can say, only last year, and one fairly large enterprise, they told their shop floor one machine is still running on Windows NT. They're still, and I don't think even Microsoft remembers when they phased out NT. So that challenge persists. Priya, I'll come to you on your viewpoint on this.
Just now you mentioned Windows NT, and you will be surprised how many unsupported Windows versions that we come across when we are dealing with OT security. Going back to Windows 5, Windows XP, and on an average, we see these systems which are either not patched or upgraded for over 10 years is minimum, and 20 years is not uncommon. 20 years of no patching and no version upgrades. So legacy or unpatched systems, unupgraded software, vulnerable software is something that we very frequently come across. It may not have been a challenge if you go back a few years when everybody was focused on attacking IT systems, data centers, enterprise networks. Now, as somebody mentioned, they are already there is enough layers of security in place. And last year's statistics alone show that 40% of organizations manufacturing or R&D environments had IoT or OT attack happen, and out of that, over 50% have paid more than $1 million in penalties. And this is just the starting of exploitation of vulnerabilities in the OT environment. There have been, again, just to give an example of state-sponsored attack, it happened with the hospital which was treating soldiers of war in Ukraine. State-sponsored, of course, the other party tried to turn off temperature by hacking into the temperature controls in the hospital, and in an extreme cold environment without heaters working, it actually caused a lot of casualties, and that's a classic example of an OT attack. I think something similar also happened in Atlanta, where somebody stole a lot of money by hacking into a casino through their aquarium. The water filter system or water filter monitor controls, the OT device was hacked into, and a lot of money was stolen. And these may be smaller in numbers as examples, but this is the vastly open space right now for hackers. And when everything else is closed, where are they going to focus on? OT environments, hospitals, manufacturing sites. Significant damage can be caused and significant data can be obtained. That's what's going to be the focus. And challenges in terms of bringing them up to date is plenty.
Okay, I will come to those some of those challenges in the next round. But you rightly mentioned, especially all the critical infrastructure, power, even power. I think US there were a couple of severe attacks. So hospitals close by home, Ames, Delhi, I think a couple of years back had a severe attacks. So those are happening in those manufacturing setups, and typically we know the manufacturing shop floors have been the sort of the last to migrate, even from a IT perspective, unlike a BFSI or how they have moved fast. So there's scope is even worse.
Even oil and gas.
Yeah, even
Most
oil
of the
and
oil
gas.
wells in Middle East are not protected.
Yes. And so any warfare in future can be primarily cyber warfare only, and that
Yeah, yeah. I strongly believe that wars don't have to be fought on land anymore.
exactly. Okay. So one thing which both Priya as well as even Rajesh mentioned is the IT. The IT part has been fairly evolved for a long time, and especially if we look at cyber security perspective, in terms of some of the to counter some of the breaches, things which have been put in place are fairly evolved now. Obviously the OT has not matched to that extent, and this mismatch has resulted in so many of these IoT deployments failing, ultimately. So what's the solution? I'll start with you, Sai, again.
Yeah, so as a CISO, I mean, if you really look at the challenges that they face, now you probably have to, it's actually in some sense like a Russian doll. Okay. Why I'm saying that is, see, once you hit the network, and then from the network you go down to the actual sensor. And there are two parts. I mean, one is the sensor, and the other one is your actuator, which would be your robotics and things like that. Then you actually hit the device. From the device, you get into the sensors. From there, you actually go into certain firmwares, OS, which is within those equipment. So it's many layers of security is there below the network that we don't see. And that is the problem in OT when you really look at that OT sector. So if I buy a box from a vendor, what is inside that box is extremely important in terms of what is the firmware that is used, what devices they've used, what security protocols they have, how are they connecting to the net. Everything is important for me, which means I have to actually go down a supply chain loop. And let me give you one example of that, which happened again in the US, and this was MKS Instruments. That is actually an instrument provider for semiconductors. They got hacked with a ransomware for $200 million. The impact was Applied Materials for $250 million because they were using the solution or the software and the devices from MKS Instruments. So it has a ripple effect. Now, if I was the CIO of Applied Materials, how deep do I go into the story to figure out where things are going wrong? So that is number one problem. Number two problem from the CISO perspective is to look at it from overall landscape to see what you're actually bringing online and how you're setting up your networks and peripheries and how you're actually kind of putting firewalls around it. So one option is to kind of keep whatever was old, keep them completely on a separate network and have a very small pipes, and then you have to add the corresponding security protocols within that. So these are things that you can at least attempt so that you kind of stop the things from moving away from the devices into the main network that you work with. Right. And then you talk about the actuator side. That's another problem. It's a similar kind of thing when you talk about robotics and other things. So if you're going to automate this plant and all that, all these kind of issues.
Then even more sensors.
Even more sensors and even more challenges of these problems too.
Especially for manufacturing, say automobile manufacturing or things.
Your car, for example, you don't know what is inside.
Exactly.
So that's the big thing. And so I mean, we did talk about cyber warfare and other things, but the dramatic thing was the pager, right? The Israeli pager story, which actually basically gets you scared that even your phone could be used for anything.
True.
What you carry in your hand. So it's that scary.
End of the day, when we are talking about OT here, focusing, but even IT, the small thing with CrowdStrike. Exactly. And how the Microsoft outage.
Yeah, correct.
Whole world was stopped.
Yeah. Aircrafts were not flying actually.
Yeah. Bhaskaran, again, since you are deeply into the operational part, how the things are moving now, how things are changing now, what's your experience?
So same thing we also experienced. Thanks to Sai for detailing out at at all levels these attacks can happen. But what worked for us is we identified that in an instant we identified that we need to upgrade our system for compliance and security requirements. So the risk of being redundant, I emphasize that we have to create a roadmap, and we detailed out a plan. And what we did particularly is we identified critical assets first, and we segmented them into a group. As part of this digital transformation activity, we did that, and we started with that, and it worked really well for us. And we are all we can do in terms of security is we can be prepared. When we say be prepared, there is no parameter for that. One of the parameter is being confident about we can face the challenges and how to go about it if we get attacked. So that being prepared very well builds your confidence, and at the ground level we are feeling confident because of what we did. And it's one of the best practice. You can note it down and try to implement in your solutions.
Okay, thanks. Rajesh, I'll put the question about, we mentioned about geographical, and now most organizations will have branches all across the world. Now, and there are certain compliances which are geography specific, and you have to sort of conform to all those compliances. And now there can be certain OT systems in some geography, IT systems in another, the mismatch we are talking about. And when the compliances challenges are there, how do you reconcile the two things?
It's a really very interesting question. Because see, what happens is when you talk about from an IT perspective, it's easy to put the regulations around it. It's easy to put a framework around it, and you can manage it. Be it a GDPR, be it a certain, or be it a DPW, you name it, right? But when you talk about in terms of sensor-based data, and I think that's the reason why EU has come out with the AI law, which talks about how the data needs to be processed, what needs to be done. Given that scenario, like nowadays what is happening is when we talk about the IT, everyone knows about it, and obviously, like as everyone is mentioning also, there's a lot of guardrails which is there in terms of frameworks and whatever you call it, it is there. But when you talk about from a OT security can be defined in a two-way. One, the OT which generates the data from a sensor perspective. Second, that OT which transmits the data to either edge or a cloud, right? So the attack can happen in either the way. If the OT itself is malfunctioning and saying that when the sensor is trying to generate a data, if that is being compromised, then the data which you will get will never be sacrosanct, and the results would be catastrophic. So best example is in today's world, like everyone is talking about, everyone is seeing what is happening around the world, be it ICBM, be it missile technology, be it a non-terrestrial network, everywhere, like where you talk about precision-based activity or precision-based decision making, and most of things are happening through the OT data, because there the data defines what is the next course of action which needs to be taken care of. But if you talk about if something is been manipulated, because the decisions are happening near to the edge, still in today's world where we're talking about industry 4.0, we are still not matured enough where we are taking a decision near to the edge. That's the reason why most of the decisions are happening in the cloud, because AI algorithm, be it LLM or whatever you call it, is happening in that. The major challenge is because of a connectivity between an edge to a cloud. The last mile connectivity is creating a problem, for which the another solution which is coming is a LEO-based constellation network, which is a non-terrestrial, which is going to completely change the dynamics. So that's the reason why in today's world, if you see, the countries are joining hands together to form something called the space law. What is the space law talks about? It talks about something which is beyond a terrestrial. Like today, if I talk about in terms of having interconnectivity, those days are gone by where I talk about I am a BFSI, you are a manufacturing, he is a retail, and the data cannot be shared in between. But in today's world, everything is available. And the moment everything is available, it is also very clearly you need to ensure that those things are protected. We may have a law of, RBI maybe have a law, or, financials, we may have a law, or manufacturing, we may have a law, or DPD, whatever you call it. So now there's the requirement for connecting all law together to form a unified way of protection. And that is what the world is working towards, specific in the OT part. Because IT, everyone is aware, everyone is matured. But in OT, what happens is there's a device, you don't know what the device contained. Like, end of the day, the functionality that device can give you a output in terms of sensory data, but what type of information it is storing? Does it have a parallel channel which is getting open apart from the channel in which you want to talk about? We talked about connected cars, we talk about OBD devices, but how many people knows that OBD can also be used to have a parallel communication setup, not only to your respective endpoint, but also to different places. So unless and until you have all those things been governed, and that's one of the reason India is going towards the chip manufacturing or the digital Atmanirbhar Bharat, because unless and until you control those on those area, whatever setup you put on top of it, you can just avoid the man in middle attack, nothing more than that. That would be my view.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to add, actually, on the geo front that you talked about, better to go for standards, but then it's like a chicken and egg kind of a thing, right? So when the minute you use standards, there is somebody who's smarter, who knows how to break it, and the minute that somebody breaks, you come and update the standard. But there are standards right now, like, for example, there is something called open telemetry on PLCs, so you can probably apply some of those kind of standards, so that at least when you talk about geographical regulations and compliance kind of a thing, so like NIS2 is coming in Europe, it's already come, and it will get implemented by March next year, or the NIST of US. All these regulations keep changing, and you have to keep updating every time. So better to, if you follow standards, you can at least get closer to being more compliant.
Okay, great. Priya, this IT-OT mismatch, and you mentioned an earlier answer about the challenges,
Yeah.
and he mentioned about Industry 4.0. When we are talking about Industry 4.0 and whatnot, maybe the next step also, but on the same breath, we are talking about IT-OT mismatch. What's the situation?
Yeah, the way we have been approaching, there are some of very large OT or IoT security programs that I'm involved in, of the order of 200,000 devices that we are trying to secure, protect. It's definitely a much longer journey and requires a lot of patience compared to the pace at which we would have achieved these transformations in IT environments. But there are structured ways in which it can be approached now. At least the way that we are looking at is asset inventory is key, and the first time when you run these solutions, about more than 50% will not be discovered, and out of what is discovered also, there's very little information that we get, and then we have to go through a manual approach, identify the device types, etc. And then there is vulnerability discovery, and the challenge with the vulnerability discovery is, again, we can only know about the vulnerabilities, we cannot go ahead and do the patching, but the connected IT systems can still be patched. So do an asset discovery, then do an inventory, manual versus automated. This is what we follow, and it's been we've seen success in that process. And then, of course, vulnerability discovery, patching, or retirement of end of life devices, at least on the IT side of OT environment. There's still a lot of IT devices there which can be retired, cannot be upgraded, but carefully planned retirement. Where we cannot do patching or upgrades, the solution is looking at compensating controls. There's a lot that we can still do in terms of implementing compensating controls at app level, for example. They will not be centralized, it is decentralized, but still it's okay. There's no way to push these agents through a SCCM or something equal, admin consoles or whatever, but we can still roll them out in individual networks, individual offices. We have had people going into the remotest possible manufacturing sites to implement these compensating controls, and do a lot of tightening of app controls on these devices. These are all ways of reducing the risk. We can never make it zero, but risks can be significantly reduced through this approach. And then finally, There's a lot of administration controls also that can be applied. When we look into these OT devices, we realize that whoever has access to the system has access to do everything on the system, and a lot of permissions and privileges are open, which are not required. These are doing specific task and only one task. Everything else can be temperature monitor, for example. It's only doing one task. Everything else on that system can be closed. So very carefully planned, and then we cannot apply the same hardening everywhere. What we apply for one device has to be different for a different device. A combination of all of this, discovery, manual enhancement, followed by device hardening, implementing compensating controls, and isolation of critical devices, segmentation. Through a combination of all these approaches, the risks in your OT environment can be significantly reduced, and that's the best way at this point.
Okay, thanks. Two important aspects you touched about that phased way the things are happening, and this app control at a different level. Taking cue from that, my next question to Sai. Uh, this is CISOs can plan a strategic phased manner of modernization of their system. We are talking about network isolation, so network segmentation happens. How much of that reduces the risk in reality?
Actually, it's a little only. I would not say it's a great one, but see, there are other techniques also that you probably need to look at, because, see, first of all, when we talk about modernization and you want to bring in newer devices, today's devices are what they call software driven. So it's going to be more software because people want to be less dependent on the hardware, which means it gives the CISO more flexibility from on one perspective, but at the same time, on the flip side, it actually exposes more because it's a software. It can be easily or much easier to hack than a hardware. But those new devices would be software driven. That is number one. Second, see, you have to do a lot of threat modeling and you have to actually do simulation exercises. And today, the use of Gen AI, for example, you can actually simulate many of these threat models and you can generate synthetic data and synthetic attacks. So that was one that they should attempt to. The second thing, which I would probably, maybe something to be very keenly looked at, from generating test cases, looking at VAPT, figuring out how to, what are the penetration things that they can run. So you can actually use Gen AI for some of those things. Again, the flip side is people would use Gen AI to actually break into your network also. So it's both sides, right? Everything has the plus and minus. And the third one, which is actually going to get little more long term, or a 3-4 year, 5 year kind of a thing, is the post quantum crypto. So everything is breakable, in seconds, because whatever you had, those 256-bit encryptions and whatever algorithms you used, elliptical curves and stuff like that, none of them would withstand post quantum crypto. So we have to really be aware, and you have to start working now.
True.
Not at the time when, after 4 or 5 years, to actually figure out, is it some security hardening that you need to be doing on your devices. So these are three, important points that I would feel we should.
Okay. Bhaskaran, again, from an operational standpoint, what has been your experience when you are doing this modernization of devices and systems, as well as sort of isolating networks with these legacy devices? In terms of challenges, what has been your experience?
So the first problem we will face when we are going for digital transformation or modernization or anywhere we use is the friction between the operations team and IT team. When we say operations team, I have an operations manager. When I go to him as an IT representative, he opens with a joke, "Aave IT wala." So he asks Bhaskaran, "What do you want?" So I show him a A4 sheet saying that I need 4 hours downtime this quarter for something to patch up. So he pulls up A3 sheet. It's a production plan for next 3 months, where he needs to run the line for at 300% capacity. Don't come for next 3 months. That's what he says. So this has been a problem. I mean, I think everybody is facing. If you're at C level, ask your deputies. They are they are facing this at every at least quarterly basis. So we formed, as I mentioned earlier, we formed a cross-functional team, and still it didn't work out. And we brought in a mediator who understands IT as well as operations. We called him business analyst. So he emphasized on documentation part. Be it legacy system or new system, he got an assistant, he extracted the manual, and he made our IT engineers who will be working on patch upgradations and everything in their own language. So it can be preventive maintenance, it can be breakdown maintenance. At both situations, you four are the guys. Actually, we run on 3 shifts, and four guys are managing the line. So anything happens at the line level, they are going to manage. So we made them write the procedures in their own language. At the end of the day, they are going to execute those protocols or checklists, whatever we call it. That's what going to happen. And our auditor also pitched in after some time, and he implemented. You guys have to practice this. Conduct a mock drill. And now we are pretty confident. Our engineers also saying that we don't have to refer to the checklist. And if you are stuck at out of 15 steps, if you are stuck at 7th step, we have to go to the checklist. Otherwise, it's muscle memory. So the point is, all goes back to the basics. You concentrate on people, process, technology. When you go to people and process, in this case, people and process are together. When it comes to technology, our vendors are equipped with the latest patch management tools, as well as they are also helping. And thanks to GenAI, as Sai mentioned, it helps in a lot of way. Our business analyst came up with a design within a day, how it can be managed, how a protocol can be defined. So thanks to technology, it's all about how you prepare and how you want to be prepared.
Thanks. And that's great when you are mentioning cross-functional team and then a mediator coming in and sort of framing a roadmap about the patching. In fact, I'd like to ask Rajesh a continuation of that question. How do you institutionalize the process? Because it involves business unit heads, the operational people, and the IT people. And this you have to institutionalize a mechanism too. So how is that being achieved?
Okay. So when we talk about from a digital transformation perspective, first and foremost is as a management or as even to the lowest level of the employee, we need to understand what is the base of it, what is the outcome we are looking for it. So is it something like we wanted to catch up to the market, or we are just doing it because we need to do it? Because a lot of time what has been seen is like, the base of digital transformation is to reduce the wastage or to avoid to, repetitive tasks. But in case, unless and until your process is well defined, whatever technology you put on top of it will not help. It is another, I'm sorry to say, sinkhole, like in terms of budget part.
True.
Because most of that, as a IT, see, the major challenge with the IT or IT team is, I'm sorry, I'm using this word, is everyone takes the task as a project. It's a tick mark. I need to do a digital transformation. I need to implement AI. I need to implement IoT. I need to have a IT IoT converge. It's a project. But is the project what the management is looking for, or is it an outcome in terms of revenue? Suppose if your activity is not contributing to tangent or intangent benefit, I don't think the digital transformation will help you in any way. People talked about RPA. People talked about in terms of moving into a AI part. But I'm sorry to say, in today's world, also around 60 to 70% people, they understand simple 4 lines of code to be AI, right? And if you are not aware exactly what you need to do, a 5-user organization may not require to have a SAP. They can still carry on with the Excel, even though it's a cumbersome. But you need to talk from an ROI perspective. Unless and until the ROI has been defined and you know what the outcome you want to look upon, you cannot bring everyone onto the board. Otherwise, what will happen is you are going to implement a project and you will expect someone to run the project. Maybe in the initial 5 months, 6 months, it will work, and after that it will fail. And you will never get a ROI. So the idea is like whenever you are talking about a digital transformations, first and foremost is you need to take every stakeholder into a agreement saying that this is what the final outcome we are looking for. And to do that, first and foremost is to change the process. Apart from the process, the mindset also needs to be changed, because it's not like I'm saying like there is a lot of buzz around the here saying that the AI is going to take over that L0 and L1 support, because the activity can very well done in AI. But someone needs to tell that the L0 and L1 can be trained to run the AI or run the module which will help to get that particular output. The idea is such things can come only with a collaborative way. And if I'm just talking a technology as a stack where I says that I have implemented something and my work will be getting done, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. And from a management perspective also, the idea is like whenever I'm taking a project, I'm just trying to see like what is that outcome I'm looking for, what is a wastage I'm reducing, and while doing it, what are the element which I need to touch upon. Technology is part of it. Apart from technology, I have process, I have people, I have a budget, I have a ROI, and on top of it, I have an ecosystem. Because in today's world, company works in a different way. Most of the people are working either in a hybrid mode, they are working from a home or wherever it is. So I cannot have a very stringent saying that I will not allow. We need to say that fine, I will allow, but in a vicinity, and I will be watching it, I will be monitoring the activity in a such a way that the productivity is not hampered, but at the same time the convergence what we talk from a digital transformation perspective is also been achieved to a fullest way.
Okay, thanks. So Priya, talking about IoT deployment, ROI, and the budget issues, how do you sort of reconcile all the three and looking at the OT challenges that we are facing?
Yeah. In the OT space, digital transformation, logistical issues are, at least in my experience, logistical issues have been more of a challenge than budgetary, because most of the OT environment and the owners are revenue centers, unlike IT, which is the cost center. So they do have money. But and technology is also getting there, it's mature enough, but still the challenges are from a non-tech perspective, because the priorities or vision or objectives of these business owners don't align with digital transformations. CTO's roadmap or CIO's roadmap not necessarily aligns with the owners of these large manufacturing plants, whose job is just to continue the revenue, produce. Production is their key objective. They don't really come with this mindset, and that typically is the first roadblock. But it's changing now, and the way to change it is again awareness. We have to create awareness, tell them what happens if they don't get on board with the digital transformations or OT security initiatives. What are the reputational or otherwise challenges that they are likely to face if they don't get on board. That's one way. Awareness and training on both sides, actually. The IT and digital transformation and tech awareness on the side of the non-IT side of the organization, which is OT and IoT, and the other way around as well. Our typical IT environment or support or operating personnel don't really understand how OT devices have to be maintained, or any controls that we implement, how they are to be operated. So instead of transferring that burden back to them, which would again make your digital transformation a failure, train the IT personnel on managing and operating OT controls as well, which takes the support headache away from the OT side of stakeholders, because they are very, very thin on IT support. And that's another reason they don't like to do anything in their environment, because they cannot increase the staff, their existing staff cannot maintain or manage. So all that support will have to be extended from whoever is driving the digital transformation. That would be the second key success factor. And the third one is these programs do take a much longer time than how it is in the IT environment. So a completely detail oriented program plan, regular checks, regular updates to them, and being very, very agile and versatile in the plans, because we may have We may have huge plans for 2025, but it may all get derailed because they have something else. They have an audit happening, and audits go on for 2 months, and during that period they won't let any change happen, and suddenly there is a production surge and they would completely say 2 months don't come to me. So we have to be agile. It should not dishearten us, because that's the crux of the business. Money comes from there, so we have to be very accommodative of those changes. So predominantly budgets and tech is not a challenge, everything else is a challenge, and it requires a very carefully thought through program plan and a lot of 3 or 4 times communication and change management.
Okay, thanks. Carefully thought-proof plan. So before we conclude, any questions from the audience? Yeah, can we have the mic there?
I know industrial observability has been in place, right, where you can definitely monitor your machines using OT sensors and all this. And obviously, you can increase your production or supply chain management. Have you guys seen getting adapted that up to what scale across the floors and possibly quantifiable outcomes coming out of it?
I'll take that questions. Basically, I work for a company called GreyOrange. We are into autonomous robots and AI-based warehousing solutions. Okay, so we provide physical robots which is connected backend with the the applications. So same thing, like when you do such activity which is autonomous in nature, you also need to monitor, right? And unless until you monitor in terms of either APO part or something like that, it actually helps to optimize not only the plan but also the real-time decisioning capabilities. And that precisely what you are talking about, we are doing it.
Yeah.
What did you leverage? Just a follow-up. What did you leverage to do that? Like observability side to monitor it?
So what happens is, unfortunately, I will not be talking in depth about it because I don't represent my company. So I have just talked in terms of general. So what happens is when you talk about in terms of observability, see, a lot of time what happens is when you create some sort of awareness, self-awareness or assisted awareness sort of scenario, you need to keep a tab on a lot of uncertainty. Like be it if you're talking about a technology which is on the LiDAR scenario, or if it's on the right, RFID, right? So a lot of times things may not be according to how you perceive, right? So you need to have certain observations, you need to have certain things. So those monitorings not only helps to have a corrections, but also to build up as part of the LLM or as part of the data, which can help to further increase those things.
So maybe we can have a side discussion, because I know I've been working with a couple of OEMs who are on that part, and I've seen many cases where they've been able to help, but I just wanted to know how it is adopted industrially on a scale.
Happy to connect with you.
You would like to add something, yeah?
Yeah, no, it varies with, I work with multiple geographies and industries. The maturity levels vary as per geography and industry, of course. Especially automobiles are at a very advanced stage. I've seen about 4 years ago, a firm that I worked with, windmill manufacturers, they had very high levels of monitoring and automation and autonomicity built in there. Australia is really advanced, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly also. They have a lot of mines, and most of them have very advanced tech implemented. Middle East is very, very advanced. Most of the oil extraction and processing units have very high levels of atomicity built there.
I'm asking many questions, but the point is, let's say, can they tell that this machine is going to die probably within the next 30 days, and it will affect your supply chain management or possibly outcome?
As of now, it cannot say next 30 days or next 2 days or next 3 days, but alerts, yes. That this is at high critical, this is 80%. Yes, they are at that level.
I have also seen when we have implemented actually at AI for predicting things, we have in fact predicted air preheaters 6 months in advance, because they maintain only 6 months. You cannot say like every month, you go and repair and things. So that is possible. So there are techniques to do it, but yes, it's been implemented in the shop floor, in the plant, in running power plants, equipments.
I know Siemens has industrial observability.
Yeah,
there are many players out there, but just wanted to know more on the scale. How is it getting? Because I know people I've been talking on Industry 4.0 to a couple of people, but I see adoption is very, 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 very less. And as you rightly said, right, OT side versus IT side, they're very reluctant on doing those things.
Those challenges are anyway there, yes.
Okay.
There was one more question.
Okay, so this is the last question. Yeah. Yeah, can we have the mic?
It was a great panel, honestly. I've been working at the convergence of IT OT from around 3 years now. This is a very, very basic question across manufacturing in terms of the adoption at the plant floor and on change management, right? So most of the time at the C levels, when we go and discuss, they agree, everything is fine. But when it comes to the adoption, let's say both sir and ma'am were talking about the legacy systems, right? NT and Windows 5 and XP, right? How do you actually, go through that challenge, right? There are still a lot of manufacturing companies which work with very old legacy systems. I've come across industries which have the legacy PLC data, PLC tags which have been retired and they're not able to recover the data. And they say, if you solve this problem for us, you're solving an industry problem for the whole industry. Yet when give them a code for an evaluation, for an inspection, they turn it down. Basically, my question is, how do you come across or work around the challenge of adoption at the shop floor level? And and if that is the case, right, if there is no adoption, going through any analytics initiative or collecting the data for analytics becomes a huge challenge, and they remain where they are and they just pump in money. So, any one of you can take it.
So if I can take a first
Sure,
stab
sure.
at it. Uh, it has been a huge challenge maybe 3 years ago, but now organizations are coming around. They may or may not have the appetite or budgets to implement, but especially for OT sites to get modern, it has to be top down as well as bottoms up. If the topmost leadership is not bought into it, then nothing is going to happen. They have to be convinced, and the way we have done is we've met each and every plant owner, trying to tell them, if there are, let's say there's one client, pharma manufacturer that I work with, they have about 120 manufacturing and R&D sites, and it required meeting at least almost all of them, trying to convince them. And what it takes is, even if 10% sign up, then the program kickstarts, and then the others will automatically sign up. And there has to be a stick and reward approach as well. One is top down, and number two, we have to tell them what are the rewards in doing it, and what happens if you don't do it, what penalties they're going to face. And like I said, early adopters is what really matters. Find out those 5 or 10% plant owners who are maybe more tech oriented, who are ready to adopt the changes that we are proposing first, and only focus on it, make it a success, and then it will become a cascading approach. We can always take this as an example, take it to the others. And the reason, this is all top down, and the reason I said bottom up is, the plant owner may give you the sign off, but when you show up at the plant, you won't get an entry. This has happened to many of our consultants. For about 2 weeks, they are waiting and nobody lets them in because this paper is missing, that verification is missing, something or the other. And then you go through all of it and go into the plant, and the IT refuses to support. He says, I'm too busy, I cannot sit with you the whole day. So a lot of hurdles, but it is doable. Like I said, we've done some very large transformations in OT environments, 200,000 devices and 120 to 200 sites that our teams had to visit and do. It's taken longer than anticipated or planned, but it requires mapping at all levels. Everybody needs to buy into what we are doing. Then it's successful, but then it can be made a success. Patience. Patience and agility is very, very important.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. So we'll close it here. We have another panel. And before we disperse, we would like to recognize the technology excellence of all our panelists and felicitate them on the occasion. Can we have the felicitations? So, Sai Prasad. Next, we have Bhaskaran.